Okay, we're continuing. This is part 2 of the history of science from the Hidden History of Science by me, Pete Rogers. I'm going to talk about where the modern science really comes from. We're going to start with the Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius. He was the last of the great Romans. After Rome was sacked, he still spoke Greek and Latin and could translate the Greek books into Latin. So he translated whatever he could get his hands on. And this is his most famous book, The Consolations of Philosophy, how to some extent we're just life depends a lot on luck and fortune. Okay, he was a Catholic scholar, polymath. He emphasized that the works of the Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle could be reconciled with Christianity. And that is well known. Again, Plato is the Platonic tradition that goes largely into St. Augustinian schools for monks like Luther and Protestant religion. And it merges tightly with the Old Testament. Whereas Aristotelianism merges more with sort of a Greek mindset, the Roman Catholic Church. Thomas Aquinas baptized Aristotle, and it's the Catholic Church. It's a lot more fun. It's a lot more practical and down to earth. Protestantism is a lot more about do as the preacher says or you'll burn in hell. Okay, it's a pain in the ass. Okay, Boethius was brilliant. He set the stage for scholasticism. Okay, he was killed by an Ostrogoth king named Theodoric because he complained about corruption in some of his men. Okay, here's just a picture of Boethius teaching, Boethius in prison. He was considered the last of the great Romans. And here's a picture of Boethius in prison saying goodbye to his family before he's to be executed. Okay. And now the next guy we're going to talk about is the replacement for Boethius. This is Cassiodorus. And he was a Roman scholar. He got promoted to replace Boethius by the same Ostrogoth king Theodoric. But he wasn't as great or brilliant as Boethius, but he was still very good. And he worked with the Pope of that time, of the remaining Catholic Church, to create a library of Greek and Latin books. And he saw himself, again, as a bridge between Greek culture and Roman culture and the Goths, the barbarians. Okay? So he was trying to make things better. So I'll give him credit for that. He started a monastery called the Vivarium, and the monasteries were the big places of learning. Any time you get a bunch of Christian men together, they're going to start doing something intellectual. And you give them some freedom, they're going to do something great. One time somebody said, why was there such great rock and roll in England in the 1960s? And it's because the Christian men had freedom, okay, and they just created it, rock and roll bands like Led Zeppelin. Okay, anyways, the name of his book was Institutiones, about how to run a monastery and how to educate the monks. He emphasized something called the trivium and the quadrivium. So the trivium, 3 parts, was grammar, rhetoric, and logic. And the grammar, rhetoric, and logic included the teaching of history. Okay, that's the trivium. And a liberal arts education means an education for a free man, for a slave, a serf, a peasant, a stupid person, an animal. You just train them in a utilitarian way to do whatever job you want them to do. But a liberal arts free man's education, you train them how to think. Okay, the quadrivium was music, arithmetic, geometry, and astronomy. Okay, and the monks at Vivarium, they were trained to copy all the Greek and Latin books, to build up a library, to have the stuff available for future generations. Okay, it's these monasteries that kept the books of the ancient Greeks and Romans and early Christians alive. Okay, they maintained civilization. No one else in the world cared about it. Okay, the typical other cultures are just a bunch of brutal dictators and tyrants who say, do as I say or we'll kick your butt. Okay, here's Saint Benedict of Nursia, and he wrote the Rules for Monasteries, a more extensive book about how monks and monasteries should train and what they should do. And sort of, it's basically labor and prayer, work and pray. Okay, Opus Dei means the work of God. Okay, so Saint Benedict was considered the most important person for getting the monetary system going after Cassiodorus. Okay, here he is, his rules for monastery given to the monks there at St. Giles Monastery in France. Here's a painting of the monks, work and pray. The monks did all the early farming, they did tons of early farming, okay? They developed all kinds of farming methods to rotate the crops, to put stirrups on the horses, a harness on the horse so they could pull more, much better than oxen, much more effective. They developed all kinds of things with optimizing the crops. They dramatically increased crop yields, which increased the population. They developed an iron plow. The monks were great farmers, okay? They were so good at it, they would feed the local people who could be starving. And they would teach them, they would take in people to become part of their group. Okay, that'll be it for today, but you see where this is going. The monasteries are doing the early science and practical trial and error engineering, working with the water wheels, the mill wheels, and increasing agricultural yields, increasing ability to mill grains and crop yields. Okay, so that'll be it for today. Hope you found that helpful.